Is Are we starting? Are we ready? Are we ready? Okay, good, we're ready! Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Animation Podcast, a weekly podcast about all things animation brought to you by FilmBook. My name is Matt Brunet, but some of you may know me as AniMat from my YouTube channel, ElectraDragon505, home of web series that are all about animation, including Animation Look Back and AniMat's Reviews. If this is your first time listening to the Animation Podcast, well, if you are here to listen to a podcast about animation and everything around animation, then this is the place for you. But specifically, though, what I will be talking about will be about the latest news that happened this week. So, for example, we shall start things off by having a little discussion about the animated short that appeared before Coco and why not many people seem to like it all that much. Then afterwards, we will be looking into a live-action prequel spin-off of Scooby-Doo. Then afterwards, we will be talking about Avatar and how the future might not be like how James Cameron is perfectly describing to us. Then afterwards, we will be going to Studio Ghibli and how they are pretty busy in there, more so than just Hayao Miyazaki's movie. And finally, we will end things off with AniMat's Pick of the Week. If you want to check out more episodes of the Animation Podcast, then all you have to do is head on down to FilmBook, which is film-book.com, by searching the Animation Podcast. You can also email us at podcast@filmbook.com with the Animation Podcast in the subject line. And so for our first story, we shall begin by talking about Coco. Now, chances are, if you are listening to this, then you most likely have seen Coco, and you have most likely loved it as well, considering that it has been a long time. Maybe it's actually been an entire year even, since an animated film was released that everybody just adored, that they fell in love with it, that their minds have been blown by seeing something like this. And of course, if there is any company that would actually do that, it would have to be Pixar. But interestingly enough, I do find that now that people have seen Coco and that everybody loves Coco, funny enough, there is one animated film that I feel like there is a lot of strong comparisons to. No, it's not The Book of Life, but actually with Inside Out. Because think about it. We're talking about two Pixar films. They're both released in a year where Pixar released two animated features, where with Inside Out they released The Good Dinosaur, and with Coco they released Cars 3. They're both highly praised by critics and audiences, and are most likely going to be sweeping all the awards. Like, I could definitely imagine Coco is going to be taking every single award that would start off by saying Best Animated Feature right over there. They're also very emotional. Like, these are two Pixar films that will guarantee to make you cry. And also, one major interesting comparison, at least that I find, is that with both animated films, if there's one thing that people really have to complain about them, is not going to be about the movies themselves, but the short that appeared before it. Now, with Inside Out, there was the singing volcano short that not many people are as fond of it as the movie itself. You know the one that I'm talking about, the one where the volcano is like, I had a dream, I hope will come true. Yeah, that one. But with Coco, it's not an animated short made by Pixar. It's actually an animated short created by Walt Disney Animation Studios. And even at that, some people would even debate if it would even be called an animated short in the first place. I am talking, of course, about OLAF'S Frozen Adventure. Yes, the holiday special to the hit Disney film Frozen. Now, Disney did decide to put that thing in front of Coco, and audiences have been very vocal that they are not happy with that decision. Like, they honestly got really mad that they would have to endure the entirety of Olaf's Frozen Adventure before actually seeing the movie that they actually paid their ticket for. And they would go on social media like on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all that kind of stuff to really go and express their anger. I have a post here or an article from the Washington Post where they gave out a few examples of some angry people on social media, like on Twitter, where one said that 11:55 p.m. My partner snores soundly as I think again about the confused mom asking the ticket taker, "Why is this Olaf movie on? Where is Coco?" And then there's another one that says, "Making us endure Olaf's frozen adventure to get to Coco is a metaphor for the Mexican-American experience. I just haven't figured out how yet." So a lot of people are pretty much mad, thinking that, okay, what the fridge is this entire Olaf thing doing? I'm not here to see Olaf, I am here to see Coco. And of course, I think we all know coming in that the number one complaint is regarding the length. But I just want to start things off by saying that this is actually not the first time that Disney would do something like this. Like, I know that it's very common for both Disney and Pixar to release an animated short before the movie would be on, but it's not the first time that they would release a short of this length, of something that is more than 20 minutes. So, going back into the Washington Post, it actually gave out a great example, talking about Mickey's Christmas Carol, which is a short that ran for 26 minutes, and it was released in 1983 before some of the re-released movies, like before they would present the reissue of something like The Jungle Book or Sleeping Beauty or The Aristocats or whatever, they would put on Mickey's Christmas Carol. But the thing is that I know nowadays a lot of people really do love Mickey's Christmas Carol, and a lot of people, including many of my friends and myself, would even consider it one of, if not the greatest adaptation of Charles Dickens' story. What it actually says right over here, it says that this is a very different era from the days of Mickey's Christmas Carol, which ran 26 minutes, when filmgoers were more conditioned to expect a featurette of that length before a Disney film. So that does pretty much give a good explanation as to why things have changed and why people are more comfortable with Mickey's Christmas Carol than with Olaf's Frozen Adventure, because at the time, people are used to seeing something that can be more than 20 minutes before seeing the actual movie itself, where nowadays, if there is something before it, it would be around 7 to 10 minutes. But I'll get a little bit more into that. But going more into the factor of the hate on Olaf's Frozen Adventure, what's very interesting to note is that even in Mexico, the country in which Coco is based on, and the country, by the way, absolutely adores it, I think it is said right now is that it's the highest grossing movie ever in the country. And also, like, as I said before, people love Coco so much down to the point that Miguel and Hector are pretty much the new icons of Mexico. Like, they've become the next Speedy Gonzales in a way. But just to say that there are some large theater chains in Mexico where they have received so many complaints about Olaf's Frozen Adventure that they flat out removed the short entirely so that audiences could just go in and watch Coco. That's pretty much it. You want Coco, you get Coco. None of that Olaf's Frozen Adventure crap. Now, with all that said, there are two things that I really want to go and get down into, like really go in depth into this discussion. Why is it that Disney decided to put Olaf's Frozen Adventure before Coco in the first place? And why is it that people don't like it? Why are people more angry about Olaf's Frozen Adventure than actually enjoying it as much as Coco? Now, I already said a little bit about why, but I'll get more in depth a little later. But first and foremost, let us discuss about why is it? Now, the article right over here in the Washington Post, they would describe a little bit that it's more John Lasseter's decision, that he felt like, well, the animation is just so good and it's so cinematic, like it is in the levels of Frozen, which is true, that like this is something that, you know, it's better to put this on the big screen than actually than something, that's a little bit on TV, Like, it's not meant as a holiday special. It's much more than that. That and also, John Lasseter did state when talking to Entertainment Weekly that the themes of family and holiday make for an appropriate fit between Olaf and Coco. Now, with that said, though, I'm not 100% sure if I would actually buy that explanation. Now, I actually do have a theory as to why Olaf's Frozen Adventure is actually put before Coco. Now, keep in mind, this is not the real reason, but I do have a good idea as to why. It's not because that, the animation is so good, or because the themes are very similar to Coco. It's not necessarily that. Disney actually put Olaf's Frozen Adventure before Coco out of trauma. Now, I know that sounds a little bit weird, like trauma? What the fridge are you talking about? I am talking about the trauma that they've had before, when Pixar would release an animated feature on American Thanksgiving, and the previous time that it happened, it really failed miserably for them. Now, what I am talking about is, of course, about The Good Dinosaur. Now, you gotta think about this. In recent years, or in the 2010 decade, Disney is pretty much accustomed to releasing a Walt Disney Animation Studios movie during American Thanksgiving. They would always go and release stuff like Tangled, or Wreck-It Ralph, or Frozen, or Big Hero 6, or even Moana. So no matter what, if Disney Animation has a movie, they'll immediately go and place it in American Thanksgiving. It's kind of like the template that seems to be always working for them pretty well. But in 2015, they didn't have a movie from Walt Disney Animation Studios. They're pretty much saving 2 of them for 2016. So that would leave Disney with 2 Pixar films in 2015 instead, with Inside Out and The Good Dinosaur. Now, Inside Out, that would be the one that they would put it during June, like in the beginning of the summer. That's the template for all the Pixar films, that if they got a big movie that's going to be released, then they'll just put it right there. But then they have The Good Dinosaur, and they decided, well, this is another animated feature, so let's go and put it in American Thanksgiving, because it worked very well with the Disney animation film, so maybe it will work with a Pixar film as well. That is not what happened. What happened was that The Good Dinosaur became Pixar's first ever box office flop. Now, we can have an entire discussion about why The Good Dinosaur failed at the box office, but that's another story right there. My point that I'm making here is that when Pixar recently decided to put an animated feature in American Thanksgiving after a very long time, it didn't work out. They actually lost money. And that actually scared both Disney and Pixar. So when 2017 rolled along and they had another pair of Pixar films that are going to be coming out, which, like I said before, is Cars 3 and Coco, and they didn't have a Disney animation film prepared, then they would do the same thing. But with Coco, they were a little bit more cautious. They don't know how audiences are going to react to it. And they want to make sure that they want to set everything up so that they don't repeat the same mistake that they have made with The Good Dinosaur. So what they did is that they decided to take a TV special that was already in the works for a while, which is Olaf's Frozen Adventure, and instead of putting it on ABC or anything like that, they decided to go and put it in front of Coco. That way, it's kind of like saying that, okay, well, worst case scenario, if people don't like Coco and they don't want to go and buy a ticket to go see Coco, then at least they'll go and buy a ticket to go see Olaf's Frozen Adventure, because this is a new Frozen short, and it would definitely sell tickets so that people can go see Frozen back on the big screen. It's pretty much a similar strategy like what Sony Animation did recently with the Emoji Movie. Because they know for a fact that the grand majority of the general audience wouldn't be that stupid to see a movie this terrible, this low quality, of such poor taste. So they decided, as a way to at least bring some audiences into it, they decided to go and create a Hotel Transylvania short that they could put before the Emoji Movie. Pretty much as a way of saying, well, if you're not going to come in and buy a ticket to go see the Emoji Movie, then at least come in to buy a ticket to come and see the Hotel Transylvania short. It's pretty much that same mentality. So at least that, again, that is just my theory. I'm not saying that is the legitimate reason, but it definitely would explain why this would be in front of Coco, is to go and encourage ticket sales. And I mean, considering how Olaf's Frozen Adventure is heavily marketed, debatably probably as much as Coco itself, yeah, I could definitely see the direction that they could be going for that one. But apparently, it looks like it did backfire a little bit. Actually, it did, but it didn't at the same time. I mean, people are still buying tickets. They are still going to see Coco, and they absolutely love the feature. But putting Olaf's Frozen Adventure in front of it, it's not a good plan at all. People did not like that aspect. So the question is, why? And of course, as I've already stated, it's because of the frickin' length. It is just way too godforsaken long. Now, before I go into that, let me just start off by saying that technically, when it comes to Olaf's Frozen Adventure in itself, I don't think there are many people that actually really do hate it. Like, if we're just talking about Olaf's Frozen Adventure on its own, I'm sure there are a lot of people that do think that it is fine. There is no way in hell that anybody would think that, oh my god, Olaf's Frozen Adventure is better than the movie itself. I mean, considering the juvenile tone that it has, like, you could definitely tell this is the kind of short that really is pandering more towards kids than just the general audience. It is still very well made. The voice acting is great, the animation is spectacular, and I really do love the song at the end when we're together. It really is sweet, it really is heartwarming, and you can tell that the short does have some heart, that it wants to celebrate the holidays, but with a little bit of a Frozen twist. But that's the thing, though. It's just way too godforsaken long. It's 21 minutes, and it really is such a stupid move for Disney, because out of all the companies out there, out of DreamWorks, out of Sony, out of Illumination, out of all those people, it should be Disney that should know this. They should know the rules about putting a short before a movie. And yet somehow they screwed it up. And honestly, the thing is, when people would go and see like a Disney and a Pixar movie, they would expect something that would be like, they would expect, yeah, they'll get the movie, but they'll also get an animated short that would range from around 7 to 10 minutes. Like, yeah, it's not necessarily the movie that they're expecting to see, but it is something short, something sweet, and something that could also be creative. Olaf's Frozen Adventure, however, like, because of the 21-minute length, it's something that just feels like it's going on forever. And I mean, even when I was watching it, I remember thinking to myself, hey, remember when I went and bought a ticket to go see Coco? Yeah, whatever happened to that? Because honestly, as it goes on, it just feels like, okay, it's kind of like, what would be a great comparison? You know, like when you have a friend over, and actually, you know what, screw this, the Washington Post actually does have a great example. Let me just go and try to find this, like kind of a good comparison. I just need to find it. Yes, there it is, okay. Apparently, the thing is, he stated that Olaf's Frozen Adventure eventually feels like the grinning house guest who won't leave, even though the party was supposed to be cleared out a long time ago. And that's how it feels like. It just goes on. And you feel like, okay, well, like, we've had fun at first, but come on, let's just wrap things up. Like, give me my movie. And especially the fact that it makes you sit in front of the theater for much longer than what people are normally accustomed to with animated features. Because the thing is, the average length of an animated movie would be 90 minutes. That's it. Now, Coco in itself is a little bit longer. It's leaning more towards 110 minutes. But with the addition of Olaf's Frozen Adventure, when you add those 21 minutes into it, then people are pretty much going to be sitting in theaters watching an animated feature with a short to begin with for more than 2 hours. And that might be crossing the line a little bit. So that's kind of the thing. The length, yeah, it does make people a little bit uncomfortable, because when you make a short and it's much longer than what people are more accustomed to, then honestly, like, it's going to turn them off. You know, like, this is not what they paid for. And speaking of which, there actually is another great explanation as to why people did not enjoy Olaf's Frozen Adventure as much. And this is why I brought up this Washington Post article, because there's this one paragraph that really is an amazing point about this. It pretty much stated here, for one thing, Pixar and Disney Animation might be creative as well as corporate cousins, but many filmgoers view them differently, judging Pixar to generally offer more emotionally complex work. And so a featurette that centers on truly silly jokes and big showy production numbers, even animated, is a bit of a tonal shift. And that's honestly a great point right over there. Because when you think about Olaf's Frozen Adventure and Coco, the tone of it is entirely different. And that's what really does throw people off. Because really, you gotta think about it. When people want to go see Coco, they would spend a lot of time trying to mentally prepare themselves to see that movie. They would have to go select a time and a date to go see that film, to go drive to the theater, to buy their movie ticket, and to go find a seat. And maybe optionally to go and get some snacks like popcorn and stuff like that. Now, throughout all that time, that's when audiences are mentally preparing themselves to go and see Coco, to enter upon the land of the dead, to go and meet characters like Miguel, Hector, and Ernesto de la Cruz. Like, they're ready to go and see that. But then when Olaf would pop in, it would kind of throw them off. And that's why people would grow a little bit more impatient as the short would go on, because they're not there to go and see Olaf's Frozen Adventure, they are there to see Coco. Now, if this short would be released on television, however, then it wouldn't get as much crap as this. Because that way, if Olaf would be released on TV, then audiences would go and mentally prepare themselves to go in their living room, to go and prepare themselves for the time and date for when it's going to be on, to change the channel onto like ABC or Disney Channel or whatever, and go see Olaf's Frozen Adventure. And then they'll most likely appreciate it a lot more than if it would be in front of Coco. So that can be also a giant explanation right over there. It's not just because of the length, but also because of the tone, where you're not really getting Coco, you're getting Olaf's Frozen Adventure, and it's not really the type of film that shares a similar tone to Coco, despite what John Lasseter says, like, oh, well, the animation is just too good to, it's too good for television, it has to be put on the big screen, and that, oh, well, the themes are kind of similar. No, not really, John. That's not a good excuse. And, the thing is, the sad truth is that those arguments, they don't necessarily work, because other companies prove that, Yeah, it would work out much better if it's just on television, regardless of how good the quality is or anything like that. In fact, this year, DreamWorks Animation actually just proved Disney wrong that it's better to put that on television than on the big screen. And what I'm talking about is with Trolls Holiday. Now, after they would do the entire Macy's Thanksgiving Parade on NBC and all that kind of stuff, DreamWorks Animation would release Trolls Holiday, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a holiday special which is themed to DreamWorks Trolls. And in there, it's pretty much the same thing like Olaf's Frozen Adventure, where the animation quality is equally as high as the movie itself, and they feature a lot of the original cast. Like, they had Anna Kendrick, and they had Justin Timberlake there. And so far, not many people are giving crap about Trolls Holiday because it's on a place where it should be. It's on television. And if people want to go and see that, then they would mentally prepare themselves to go on television, put it on the right channel, and watch Trolls Holiday. Unlike Olaf's Frozen Adventure, where people were mentally preparing themselves to go see Coco, and then whoops! Nope, they're not in Mexico, they're in godforsaken Arendelle. So that's the whole thing with Olaf's Frozen Adventure. It's not necessarily that people hate the short itself, it's where it is placed. And because of that, considering that it becomes way too long than what people are accustomed to with animated shorts, and that the tone is a lot more different than what Coco would deliver, it throws audiences off, and it feels like they're not getting what they were promised. You know, they're not getting Coco, they're pretty much getting this dumb Olaf cartoon. And I think that's kind of the big thing with this. Now, yeah, sure, nowadays we could say that Coco is not just a critical hit, but also a box office hit, but hopefully Disney will learn their lesson that they're not going to do something like that again. That if they do have an animated short, just make sure that it's around 7 to 10 minutes, and that's pretty much it. Otherwise, they will get a lot of complaints like this, and it would actually make the short itself look bad. And I don't know if in the future, maybe people will grow a little bit more fond of it when it is placed where it should be, like on television and stuff like that. But honestly, that is kind of a bad move for Disney regardless. So hopefully, with all that said, Disney does learn their lesson not to put something more than 20 minutes before a movie, and to make sure that if they do something like that, like, have the tone be similar, please. Like, don't just look at the small themes and just do that. Like, I understand if, like, my theory would actually be correct and that you did it because of the whole Good Dinosaur, not controversy, but because of the whole Good Dinosaur disaster and you don't want to do that again. But still, man, not a good idea, though. We love Coco, but doing something like Olaf's Frozen Adventure and put that in front of Coco, bad move, Disney. That's just a bad move. Okay, so for our next story right over here, we're going to be talking about Scooby-Doo. Now, lately, if we see Scooby-Doo, that means that there's a brand new direct-to-video animated feature released. Now, not too long ago, they did announce one where it's going to be this giant crossover of Scooby-Doo and Batman, the Brave and the Bold, where now Scooby and the gang must team up with Batman in order to fight off the Gotham villains and some of the villains from Scooby-Doo, like the Crazy Kook and the Minor 49er and stuff like that. But apparently, there is another upcoming movie that will be most likely heading direct to DVD, but it does have a very interesting concept, because it's not necessarily about Scooby-Doo, but it's about the ladies of Scooby-Doo. Warner Brothers has officially announced that they are going to be making a live-action spin-off prequel called Daphne and Velma. And it's exactly like how it sounds. It is a movie that stars Daphne and Velma. And believe it or not, production is actually going on right now. They are filming the project, and they already even have some of the stars, including Sarah Jeffrey and Sarah Gilman, that are going to be playing both Daphne and Velma, respectively. And by the way, if you guys want to know, they're actually filming right now in Atlanta, and the production companies that are going to be working on this include Blue Ribbon Content and also Blonde Girl Productions, which is the production company that belongs to Jennifer and Ashley Teasdale. But some of you might be wondering, what is this movie about? Well, if I may go here in my source on Animation Scoop, it actually says right over here, before their eventual team up with Scooby and the gang, bright and optimistic Daphne and whip-smart and analytical Velma are both mystery-solving teens who are best friends but have only met online. Until now. Daphne has just transferred to Velma's school, Ridge Valley High, an incredibly tech-savvy institute with all the latest gadgets provided by the school's benefactor, tech billionaire Tobias Bloom. And while competition is fierce among the students for a coveted internship at Bloom Innovative, Daphne and Velma dig beyond all the gadgets and tech to investigate what is causing some of the brightest students in school to disappear, only to emerge again in a zombified state. So that's basically the plot that's going on, is that Velma and Daphne, they're gonna go and they're gonna go and solve their own mystery that's going on in the school, where apparently the brightest students are becoming zombies. So hopefully they'll still capture that Scooby-Doo tone without really having Scooby-Doo. And you know, this idea of making this movie is actually quite interesting, because when you think about the ladies of Scooby-Doo, often they can debatably be overlooked. Yeah, we know about Fred, the leader, and of course, I mean, Warner Brothers really loves to play with Shaggy and Scooby-Doo. A lot of people could even debate by saying that those are the real stars of the show throughout the entire franchise. Like, it's not necessarily about the entire mystery machine, the mystery gang, but it's more about Shaggy and Scooby-Doo. And, you know, we do have a little bit of Velma, but then you also have Daphne. And I think that girl is the most overlooked character of Scooby-Doo, because the thing, or at least among the main gang, because the thing is, everybody always perceives Daphne as the pretty girl. Often in the show, she would be the one that she would find something and then kind of screws up, or often finds herself to be the damsel in distress. And not many people really see her as a bit of a role model or something like that. And it is true that in many of the Scooby-Doo projects, they don't really play much with her character. Like, she's just mostly there to be the pretty girl, while you got the others that already have their roles, like you got Shaggy and Scooby as the comic reliefs, you got Velma as the brains who always loses her glasses, and you got Fred as the leader. But Daphne, she's just there for the looks. She's just there to stand there and be pretty. And honestly, I would like to see the idea that Daphne can be a little bit more than that she would contribute to the gang a lot more than just, like, to stand there and be pretty and all that stuff. I mean, technically, there could be some projects that would actually get into that, like, whether it be the most recent Scooby-Doo series that just looks like Family Guy characters, or even, like, the live-action Scooby-Doo movies. I think they played a little bit more with Daphne's character, but yeah, often people would rather want to go and ignore that. But honestly, I do like the idea to see Daphne played a lot more with her character, tried to do something a little bit more. I mean, yeah, she really is cute. She really is a gorgeous girl, but honestly, I would like to see Warner Brothers play a little bit more with her character. I mean, even with Velma, they do play a lot with her as well. Like, they do look more into her character, that, she's got the brains, and often see the different types of scenarios that Velma would get into. They already did a lot with her, but it's more with Daphne that they should give her a lot more of a chance. Now, with all that said, is this movie, Daphne and Velma, gonna do justice to that? Oh, absolutely not. I wouldn't touch that thing with a 10-foot pole. I am confident that this thing is going to godforsaken suck. I mean, this is going to, chances are, this is going to be a direct-to-DVD movie that is just going to be pretty low quality. And honestly, I'm not trusting that thing, and considering that only now they're making a huge announcement about it, and that right now they are currently in the works, they're filming it, and it's going to be out next year, yeah, that's already a bad sign right over there that we're not really going to get a top quality Scooby-Doo movie right over here. So, yeah, honestly, I don't trust it. I like the idea of expanding upon the characters like Velma, and especially with Daphne. It's just, I don't know. I'm not trusting this one in particular. Maybe they can do something like that with the upcoming Scooby-Doo movie that's going to be fully animated. The one that Warner Animation Group is going to be making in I think they set it up for 2020, I think now. But I don't know. That all I'm saying is that I like the concept, but execution-wise, I'm not going to trust these people, especially if the main person on board is going to be like Ashley and Jennifer Teasdale. Yeah, I don't know. But if you guys are interested to check out something like this, then all you have to do is go and wait until 2018 when they would release Daphne and Velma. Okay, so for our next story right over here, we're going to be talking about Avatar. Now, I know that technically Avatar is not necessarily an animated feature per se, but considering that it is a project that is very visual effects heavy, this is definitely something that a lot of artists and animators would be at work on this, so it definitely is worth talking about. And considering that it is a huge movie franchise, I'm sure this is something that everybody does have an opinion regarding Avatar. Now, I think I have talked about this last time in a previous episode of the Animation Podcast, where the big news regarding Avatar is that James Cameron, not only is he currently at work on making all 4 sequels in a row, like he's not going to do any other projects in between, but also 20th Century Fox decided to let James Cameron have a combining budget of approximately $1 billion, which pretty much means that the 4 films will have a budget of around $250 million each. So with all that said, it seems like now in the future, we're definitely going to be having 4 Avatar sequels happening in the 2020 decade, right? Well, maybe not. Because there is one factor that you would have to consider, and I know it seems like a crazy question, but it is still worth asking. What if they fail? What if 20th Century Fox doesn't see their $1 billion come back from these movies? Well, apparently James Cameron did actually think about that, and he talked with Vanity Fair about it while he was discussing about his legacy, like the 20th anniversary of Titanic, and also what he's currently doing with Avatar, which right now he is at work on the 2nd and the 3rd film. But regarding its future, he said, and I quote, "Let's face it, if Avatar 2 and 3 don't make enough money, there's not going to be 4 and 5. They're fully encapsulated stories in and of themselves. It builds across the 5 films to a greater kind of meta-narrative, but they're fully formed films in their own right, unlike, say, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, where you really just had to sort of go, man, okay, well, I guess I better come back next year. even though that all worked and everybody did. So basically, the plan is, if Avatar 2 and 3 ended up becoming not necessarily box office bombs, but if they end up becoming flops, or they don't meet the expectations of 20th Century Fox, then we might not actually see a 4 and a 5, which could explain why the schedule for the 4th and 5th film are a little bit later than 2 and 3, because 2 and 3 are released in 2020 and 2021, while 4 and 5 are a little bit later. I think, like, the 4th film is either 2023 or 2024, and the 5th one is going to be in 2025. So that's basically the big plan. And I think the big question out of all this is that if this is the case, is Avatar 2 and 3 going to flop? Well, honestly, I don't know. Because at this point, like, I can see the direction that James Cameron is going with this, but yeah, I can see that there is also a possibility that, yeah, maybe a fourth and a fifth film might not actually happen. The only way that it will guarantee to happen is if 2 and 3 are amazing films. And that's kind of the big problem with Avatar. The first film isn't all that stellar. I mean, you're going to hear a lot of praises about that movie. Like, you will hear a lot of people talking about it, that they love the film. Like, oh my god, the way that the world is built, like the world of Pandora is amazing. The visual effects are so innovative. The technology is revolutionary. Oh my god, and everything just looks amazing. It's so cool. The 3D is just so awesome. Like, it is so fantastic. It is so mind-blowing. Okay, yeah, sure, that's nice, but what about the movie as it is? You know, like the story and the characters and the writing and all that stuff. It's okay, I guess. You know, it's fine. It has a little, you know, it's just your typical Pocahontas story, but yeah, it's okay. And that's the big Achilles heel of the Avatar franchise, is that the movie itself, the one that started it all, people would say that the movie is just and that's what the second and the third film cannot be. They can't just be films where people would just go especially the second one, considering that it would be the franchise first big, you know, it would be its first impression on audiences to see, like, the comeback of Avatar, and they would say, like, okay, now we're fully committed to, like, make sequels and release them one after another and all that kind of stuff. Now, I will say, though, that I could definitely see the second one being a big deal. Now, there's no way in hell that any of these movies are actually going to be making the same numbers as the first film, because we literally are talking about the highest grossing film of all time. But the thing is, with Avatar 2, I could definitely see it be a major hit. Like, it wouldn't surprise me at all that if 2020, it would go and surpass $1 billion at the box office, because people are going to be freaking out over the comeback of Avatar. A little bit in the veins of, like, Star Wars The Force Awakens, that we're seeing it coming back to the big screen. You know what I mean? It's somewhere around that area. But with the third one, that's where things are going to be a little bit iffy, because that film is going to be released a year after the second one. And that's when people are really going to determine if it's really worth watching or not. Because if the second movie just comes out the same thing, like, people are just going to look at it and they're just going to go, you know, it's fine, I guess. They won't really be that interested in watching the third film. So that's where it's really going to be iffy. It's not really the second and third film that will determine if we're going to have a fourth and a fifth. It's going to be the performance of the third film. If people will have enough interest to really keep the momentum of Avatar going. And if not, then maybe a fourth and a fifth one won't be worth it. We'll just have to wait and see. Honestly, that's the whole thing with this. The second one, yeah, that's guaranteed. It's guaranteed to be a hit. The third one, that I honestly don't know. It'll depend if people are sick and tired of Avatar, a little bit like how people are sick and tired now of the DC extended universe, considering right now, like, the Justice League is not doing well at the box office, especially with its $300 million budget. I honestly don't know. Like, really, if we're gonna have a fourth and a fifth, we would have to wait and see how the third one will go. But if you guys are still interested to check out Avatar, at least we know when the second one will be coming back, and that film will be out in theaters on December 18th, 2020. Okay, so for our next story right over here, we're going to be going to Japan to the most beloved animation studio in the country, Studio Ghibli. Now, we know right now that Hayao Miyazaki is currently hard at work working on his next feature film called Kimitashi wa Do Iriku Ka, or as we know it in English as How Do You Live? But apparently his son is also hard at work as well. Going into my source here on Animation Magazine, iconic Japanese toon shop Studio Ghibli has confirmed that both Goro Miyazaki and his father Hayao Miyazaki are currently working on new feature film projects. I've already mentioned what's going on with Hayao Miyazaki, but with Goro, it says that producer and studio co-founder Toshio Suzuki announced that the younger Miyazaki is crafting a CG animated project. Now, that's pretty much all that we know about it, and it looks like Goro Miyazaki is going to be at work on creating the first ever computer animated Studio Ghibli movie. And that's all we know so far. We don't know the title, we don't know what the movie will be about. All that we know is that it's going to be computer animated and that Goro Miyazaki is going to be directing it. Now, I will say that with the filmmaking journey of Goro Miyazaki, it is actually quite interesting because at first he wasn't really someone that wants to do filmmaking, but then nowadays he really did get the hang of it. Now, he didn't really start off that well. He began with his directorial debut with the 2006 film Tales from Earthsea. And with that film, it wasn't really that well received. In fact, it's almost unanimous that people would say that Tales from Earthsea is the weakest Studio Ghibli film. Not a bad film per se, you know, the animation is still great. It's just when people would look at that film, they would go, it's okay, I guess. You know, it's not like Spirited Away, or if it's like My Neighbor Totoro or Castle in the Sky or anything like that, that's just purely mind-blowing. But, you know, like, it's okay. But, thankfully, his next feature film, From Up on Poppy Hill, he got a lot of improvement. Like, it's like he learned his mistakes from Tales from Earthsea and would go and improve upon them when doing From Up on Poppy Hill. Especially considering that it was made when there was this one big disaster that occurred in Japan during the making of this. Crap. You know, honestly, I do feel stupid that I do forget what it is. It's not an earthquake, but it's like kind of like a nuclear explosion that did happen. Or maybe it is an earthquake, actually. But, like, it's an earthquake that caused this nuclear explosion. And, like, it was pretty traumatizing for Japan for that to happen. But still, like, all to say that From Up on Poppy Hill, it actually came out pretty well. And very interestingly enough, Goro Miyazaki actually does have a lot of experience working with computer animation, since he also did help create an animated series, which is all computer animated, which is Ronya, the Robber's Daughter, which recently you can go and check it out on Amazon Video. And with all this, it's actually very interesting to see all this develop. And, you know, it's great to hear that Studio Ghibli is still hard at work making movies. And considering right now they did actually have a major change in terms of the higher-ups. there is a little section here in the Animation Magazine article that even states the good news for fans comes after a senior management shakeup earlier this month, which saw the first major executive change in nearly a decade as former banker Kiyofumi Nakajima took over as CEO from Koji Hoshino. Nakajima previously ran Ghibli when it was a subsidiary of his bank, and in 2005 was appointed director of the Ghibli Museum in Tokyo. So at least we now know that there are some big changes going on in Studio Ghibli, so hopefully it could pick up some steam, because it's been a while since we've heard anything from Studio Ghibli, or we've seen any projects coming from Ghibli. With like the last time was with the 2015 Hiromasa Yonebayashi film When Marnie Was There, which is a fantastic film, by the way, very emotional, very beautiful. And with that said, considering that now both Goro and Hayao Miyazaki are making movies there, it is actually pretty exciting to see that, they're still hard at work, they're still making movies, and the legacy of Studio Ghibli is still going on, especially that little scare that we had years ago, thinking that, oh my god, Studio Ghibli might shut down, which is not the case. I mean, yeah, maybe they would need some changes for this to happen, but it's going to be nice to see what's going on, and hopefully Goro Miyazaki's project might turn out pretty well. So we don't know when it's going to happen, but maybe when the 2020 decade comes, we will also see the comeback of Studio Ghibli. And so finally, we will now go and end things off with AniMat's Pick of the Week. Now, if you may remember last week, I did go in a little bit of a dark and low note where I discussed about the pretty heartbreaking news about John Lasseter taking a 6-month leave of absence due to being confronted about his sexual misconduct that he has been doing over the years. And honestly, like I said before, it was very heartbreaking to hear, and it was honestly very shocking for the entire animation community and the animation industry. And the only thing we can do now is just hope for the best for the women working at Pixar, that they would have a better environment to work with, and that they would be treated more as the professional artists that they are, and hope that John Lasseter does learn his lesson and that he would get all the help that he would need during that 6-month break. But with all that said, I decided that for this week, we're going to balance that out with an AniMat's Pick of the Week that it would be worth celebrating about, that we could be happy to discuss about, that we can have some fun with it. So let's go ahead and make some magic! Now, you may know, not too long ago, it actually was the 25th anniversary of the biggest and most beloved animated feature released in 1992, Disney's Aladdin. And there have been several articles, and the one that I'm using right now as an example, Variety, would take a moment to look back upon Aladdin and just discuss the major achievements that they have made. And that is something that I want to do as well. Just take a moment to just look back at Aladdin and the big impact that it has made in animated features and just in pop culture in general. Now, the thing is with Aladdin is that we all know it as one of the major animated features released during the Disney Renaissance. And we would consider it one of the big ones, considering that it was released during the first half of it. And in that category right over there, that's where people would count some of the best Disney films ever, like The Little Mermaid, The Rescuers Down Under, Beauty and the Beast, of course Aladdin, and then also The Lion King. That's where the biggest and the brightest would appear. And with Aladdin, it definitely is no exception, because there are a lot of things in there that they really nailed it and really changed the course of how some people would even make animated features to this day. And interestingly enough, some people would even say that it would actually be the best movie from the Disney Renaissance. And in the article from Variety, that's what animation historian Jerry Beck is actually saying. So, reading from my source here, Beck noted, looking back at 1989's The Little Mermaid, which was directed by John Musker and Ron Clements, and 1991's Beauty and the Beast, which was the first animated film to earn a Best Picture Oscar nomination, that as well as they are made, there are still a few scenes, a few shots, crowd sequences, where things are just a little off, in his opinion. When they hit Aladdin, they hit a new level of what he calls perfection that hasn't been at Disney since Walt Disney passed away. In short, he said, Aladdin is perfect in every direction. Production values, the use of the computer, character animation, the look of the background characters, the animation of the smallest things in it, and of course, the element of storytelling. It has all of the emotions. As much as we all remember it for the laughs and Robin Williams and the genie sequences, it has a great story. You wouldn't laugh as hard as Robin Williams if the story wasn't so solid. Now, it is a pretty interesting discussion right over there, and I'm sure that with many people, they would have different opinions on which one do they think is the best animated feature that came from the Disney Renaissance. You'll have people that will say Aladdin like Jerry Beck, or you'll have people say that it's The Lion King, or you'll have people like myself that would say it's Beauty and the Beast. But honestly, no matter what answer it is, I don't blame anyone, and I don't blame Jerry Beck thinking that Aladdin is the best Disney Renaissance movie, because it definitely is fantastic. And yeah, I definitely do agree with him that many of the things that they did right, they did it perfectly. That the animation is crisp, the songs are a lot of fun, it has a good story, and the performances are phenomenal. And I think that's the one major thing for me that I feel like it really did it best, more so than any other animated feature, is actually regarding the performances and actually the use of comic reliefs. In a way, when you do think about it, this is the animated film that others wish to be. Because one of the common problems that I've seen in a lot of animated features in recent years is that there would be way too many comic reliefs and they don't know how to use them. Like, for example, I have recently seen Sony Animation's The Star, and that actually came out like crap. I'm not gonna lie. And one of the biggest problems is that there are way too many side characters, like way too many comic reliefs, that the movie doesn't know how to use them. A lot of them are actually even pointless and they contribute nothing to the story. Rather it be like the camels or like the little trio that consists of a messed up goat, a singing horse, and a stray cow. It just doesn't work. Or the straight man cow, as I would say. I'm like, I don't know, maybe the cow could be gay, who knows? No, but anyways, you get what I'm saying, though, is that there are some movies like The Star or like the Ice Age movies, that's a great example right over there, where they would have way too many comic reliefs and they don't know how to use them. Aladdin, however, not only are there a lot of comic reliefs, but they know how to use them, and they use them perfectly. When you think about characters like Iago, or Abu, or the magic carpet, or debatably Sultan can probably count as well, and especially the genie. These are great characters that have a lot of great comedic performances, rather it be through the actors like Robin Williams and Gilbert Gottfried, or through the animators, like with Abu and the Magic Carpet, that are technically a little bit more silent. Those are great characters, and they actually do have a point to the story. Like, why is it they're in this movie? And it really does make it a lot of fun. It really does contribute to how this movie is actually really enjoyable. And another thing that other animated films really do admire from Aladdin is actually the use of pop culture references. I think, like, if we would have to point to one movie that really made it that much of a trend where you see animated films making pop culture references, it's because of Aladdin, and that is because of Robin Williams' legendary performance. I mean, this is actually the film that new generations of people are introduced to Robin Williams. Like, this is why many millennials fell in love with Robin Williams in the first place, is because they would first see him in Aladdin. And he really does define being a show stealer. Like, I'm sure that when it comes to many people, the first thing that you would think of about Aladdin, it would be the genie. And it's heavily because of Robin Williams' amazing, fast-paced comedic performance. And he would bring out any sort of pop culture references, and every single one of them works. Even if they're too old for people to understand, even if they don't get the reference, it works. It's funny. It's enjoyable. That's what that's what makes them function. And honestly, I think that's kind of the main problem with many other animated features nowadays when they would make pop culture references. Like when you think about movies like Hotel Transylvania, or the Emoji Movie, or the Smurfs, or anything like that. When you think about those films, like, they would try to make pop culture references to be funny, but they don't work. They don't have that comedic timing. They don't have good directors or good writers that understand the function of that comedy. Robin Williams does, however, and that is why people adore it. Even to this day, like 25 years later, they would love that. But also, there is another big thing about Aladdin that really does work, and especially when it comes to the genie. It's not just because of Robin Williams' performance, but it's also the breakthrough animation performance of Eric Goldberg. I will admit that Eric Goldberg, I would say he is actually one of my favorite animators. And what's actually quite amazing is that beforehand, he would be in London working on some commercials and stuff like that, and then Disney would ask him to come on down to Disney and do the animation on the genie. And what Eric Goldberg came in with is that he delivered animation that actually does complement with the genie. He actually makes it a lot of fun. And even on this Variety article, he would explain how the art style on the genie is heavily influenced by Al Hirschfeld, and how it does help him try to make all these different caricatures. Like whenever Robin Williams would make a reference, like he would go and make like a caricature of the person that he is referencing, and it just works out so well. And I mean, you need animation like that to really complement and to really, like, you know, go with the flow on how fast Robin Williams is going. And ever since then, Eric Goldberg really made himself a big legend at Disney. Ever since then, he has created some of the most enjoyable and fun-looking animations that you would find. There's a lot to list off, but some of the recent examples that I can think of would include Louis from The Princess and the Frog, Rabbit from the 2011 Winnie the Pooh movie. In fact, his animation is probably the best thing that ever came from that feature, and also Maui's tattoo from Moana as well. So yeah, he definitely knows how to make hand-drawn animation a lot of fun, and it's with his animation performance with the genie that really did started it all for him, and it's just absolutely fantastic. But I think another big thing that we could discuss about regarding Aladdin and like the major memorable things is actually, of course, regarding the songs. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of us have a one song that we all fell in love with in Aladdin. Rather it be something like One Jump or Friend Like Me, Prince Ali, or even the Oscar-winning A Whole New World. Like, probably even A Whole New World is the most memorable, it's probably the most memorable song from Aladdin. And it's actually very interesting because some of the songs are actually written by Alan Menken and Howard Ashman before he would unfortunately pass away due to AIDS. And some of his songs are still in there, like Friend Like Me, Prince Ali, and there is one more. I just want to go and double check on which one would that be. Just like, I know this article said it. I'm sorry, it just really did escape my mind, but where is it? Fudge nabbit. Okay, but yeah, you do get the idea. It's pretty much or hold on, I think I got do I got it? Oh yes, okay, there we go. I found it. Yes, Friend Like Me, Prince Ali, and the opening song Arabian Nights. And what's interesting to note is that Howard Ashman's involvement, actually, like, he had a bit of a different idea of the entire movie in itself, because originally there was one character that did get deleted a little bit later. It was actually Aladdin's mother. She would have a big part in this role, but unfortunately, after the rewrites and after Howard Ashman passed away, her mother just got pretty much out. And there were some songs that he wanted to do for the mother character, but they didn't really pull through. But there are some elements from Howard Ashman's idea of what he wanted to do for this Aladdin movie that would later move on onto the recent Broadway adaptation of Aladdin, which is still, like, really big and really popular in New York. Like, Aladdin is really heading its way to become one of the next big Disney Broadway shows next to The Lion King and Beauty and the Beast. So that's another big impact that Aladdin has right over there. And actually, speaking of which, Aladdin would actually go on and spin off many different things. Like, there's a TV show that did actually have quite a cult following, and there's also some direct-to-DVD movies. In fact, Return to Jafar was actually the first ever direct-to-video Disney sequel that did start that massive trend of all those different Disney sequels. That was the first one ever. And may I just say, when it comes to Aladdin and the King of Thieves, which is the third Aladdin film, that is honestly the best, not the best, but one of the best direct-to-DVD Disney sequels Disney has ever done. Considering that they did brought back Robin Williams, and the songs are shockingly amazing. Like, honestly, it's actually worth watching, really. I mean, sure, the animation is crap, but honestly, it's the kind of film that's, like, it shouldn't be as good as it is right now, considering that we are talking about Aladdin 3, for God's sakes. And overall, Aladdin is just a great experience. It really was a fun movie to check out, and yeah, definitely, easily one of the best Disney films that they have done. And especially nowadays, like, they can't, like, watching the movie now, sometimes it can have a brand new meaning. Like, I remember, not too long after Robin Williams passed away, tragically, I remember there was a moment me and my friends, we would go and watch Aladdin just for fun, and a lot of them really got teary-eyed, and even myself, admittedly, when we saw the ending when the genie was free, because, like, ever since Robin Williams' passing, like, it brought in a whole new meaning. So yeah, overall, when it comes to Aladdin, it really did make a major impact when it comes to how we make animated features nowadays, when it comes to animated comedies. It really is the movie that some wish to be. And it's definitely a lot of fun. And I just want to say congratulations to the big legacy that Aladdin has left to the directors, John Musker, Ron Clements, to the songwriters, Alan Menken, Howard Ashman, and Tim Rice, and all the animators also who worked on there, like Mark Henn, Eric Goldberg, Glenn Keane, Andreas Deja, Tony Bancroft, and so much more. And also to the actors who performed in there, like Robin Williams, Gilbert Gottfried, and all those people. They really did a fantastic job. And if you want to share your story about your experience with Aladdin or your relationship with Aladdin, you can go ahead and write down in the comments below about how you feel, or like if you are in a place where you can go ahead and write comments, then you can go ahead and do so and share your story with Aladdin, just as a fun little way to go and celebrate the 25th anniversary of that movie. And that will be all that I've got for this week, so I just want to say thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Animation Podcast. You could go ahead and find more of my work at film-book.com. All you have to do is search for Mathieu Brunet or the Animation Podcast. You can also go and find more, you can go find me on my Twitter at AniMat505. Now, if you've listened to this podcast on iTunes or any other podcast service, do you mind doing us a little bit of a favor and rate and review this episode? And if you are listening to this podcast on YouTube, then hit that like button in our video and leave us a little comment on your thoughts on the news this week. Tune in next week for the latest episode of the Animation Podcast and all things animation. Thank you guys so much for listening, and until next week, see you later, dudes.